Hello, my name is Luis Cortez. I work at the University of Campinas, and today we are going to talk about the history and importance of Brazilian bioethanol from sugarcane and about the challenges to overcome in the coming years. Brazil produces sugar and ethanol in a very characteristic, very peculiar way. It's a joint production. We adapted the existing sugar facilities to produce also ethanol, and in a way that it promoted the sugar production, the low-cost sugar production and the low-cost ethanol production. Brazil in this way became the first producer of sugar in the world, and also sugar cane and ethanol contribute significantly to the Brazilian energy matrix. We can estimate the contribution in the primary energy matrix to about 20%. Right now we're going to talk a little bit about the history of ethanol production in Brazil. The ethanol production, the ethanol program started in 1975, but Brazilian experience with fuel ethanol started during the 30s, when in the 1930 the president of Brazil started to promote fuel ethanol utilization in light vehicles using government cars, and the utilization of ethanol in the gasoline, in blends with gasoline, varied to about 7% if you consider the Second World War to 1975. 1975, Brazil was in a very difficult situation. Remember that we had the oil shock in '73, and Brazil was Brazil was spending about 50% of all its revenue in buying the imported oil. Imported oil responded by about 80% of the oil needs during the 70s, and Brazil had no way other than to start to produce fuel ethanol depending on its agriculture. This was what we can consider to be the first phase, 1970 to 1975 to 1979. During the 80s, there was a transition in the Brazilian politics. We went from a military to a democratic regime, and also we had to deregulate the production and the production system. And this was a hard thing to do, but Brazil learned how to improve the so-called Brazilian model, producing sugar and ethanol together. In the 90s, for example, this production was already mature. The Brazilian model was already mature. Brazil became the most important producer of sugar in the world, and then also we started to blend. Became more important blends on the ethanol in gasoline, other than utilizing ethanol itself as a pure fuel in the vehicles. This figure that we see now shows the car sales per type of fuel. You can see that at the beginning of the ethanol program, we had gasoline cars with a small percentage of ethanol blended into the gasoline, but we're considered gasoline cars. And on green, you can see that the ethanol cars went up, the pure ethanol cars went up until reach a maximum at the end of the 80s, when the gasoline cars reached a minimum. That was coincided with a crisis and a lack of fuel, lack of ethanol in the market, and some other fuel like methanol had to be imported, blended with ethanol to maintain the fleet. But this discouraged the consumers, and the gasoline cars pick up again. You can see a new rise of the gasoline cars, and this predominated during the 90s, and the drop of ethanol car sales during the 90s. You can see that until the end of 90s. And at the end of 90s, what happened was that the consumer started to blend, can you imagine that? To blend ethanol into the gasoline, making their own cocktail, and this suggested to the industry that something had to be done that way. A flex fuel engine had to be introduced. And at the end of the 90s was introduced the flex fuel cars at the beginning of the years 2000, and you can see that on red, and that predominates, and today it represents almost 90–95% of the total cars sold in Brazil. This figure that we see now, the average ethanol content in gasoline in Brazil. First thing we need to do is to differentiate what is ethanol utilization itself, alone, pure, and the ethanol blended into the gasoline. This graph will show you the blend with the ethanol blend in the gasoline. Remember that when we said before, during the 1930s, the federal government started by encouraging the consumers to use ethanol blending into the gasoline. This was about 5%. It lasted until mid-60s, until the end of 60s, with the more important production of sugar in the world. Something had to be done to encourage the ethanol into the blends of gasoline to create another revenue for the sugar sector. And that's the race that you see over there, coinciding with the first oil shock. Then you see the second oil shock that also promoted the blend of ethanol into the gasoline. And that reduction that you see over there in 1989 is a result of a crisis, because there was a lack of ethanol in the market and the government had to reduce the percentage of ethanol into the gasoline. And then it picks up again at the mid of 90s and the years 2000, when the government started to encourage once again the increase of percentage of ethanol into our gasoline in Brazil, reaching what we see today, about 25%. One important aspect to demonstrate is the way sugarcane is harvested in Brazil. The changes, the transition that we went through in that process. Remember that before, during the 90s, until the 90s, most of the sugarcane, practically all sugarcane, was harvested by hand and with burning. The only sugarcane that was harvested without burning was the one that was used after that as a seed. So we had to, but until that moment, sugarcane being burned was kind of creating pollution in the fields, provoking some respiratory diseases, and population was unhappy with the situation, and the government of São Paulo was forced to implement a protocol to phase out sugarcane burning in the state of São Paulo. That is what we can see in this graph, that we see manual labor, manual harvesting going down and being substituted by mechanical harvesting as it goes up in a process that lasts approximately 15 years. But today we can say that at least in the state of São Paulo, practically all sugarcane is harvested by machine and green. One interesting point to analyze is the feedstock. The way the sugarcane is very interesting feedstock, because it's an energetic feedstock and it's very convenient for the production of ethanol. But this is a crop with certain characteristics. We plant the seed, and it takes about 18 months to make the first cut. So the plant grows and it takes 18 months, and then you can cut the plant every year subsequently, and 5–6 times sometimes, and until you need to renew the whole field, the whole plantation. The way the sugarcane is produced in the state of São Paulo, in the central south of Brazil, is without irrigation. It's rain-fed. We don't use irrigation. Just we recycle the nutrients. The vinasse is recycled in a slight rain that we call, in a fertile irrigation system. But basically, we produce sugarcane in the central south of Brazil without rain. It's a crop that, because it's energetic, it occupies a relatively small amount of land. If you compare with the area of Brazil, the area of Brazil is 850 million hectares. Sugarcane right now occupies 9 million hectares in the country, about 1% of total area of Brazil. Half of it, 4.5, for the sugar production, half of it, 4.5, for the production of ethanol. So you can say that 0.5% of the area of Brazil is dedicated for fuel ethanol production from sugarcane. We mentioned before a little bit about the feedstock. Now we're talking a little bit about the sugar mills, the way sugarcane is converted into sugar and ethanol. Typically, you have an adaptation. You had existing sugar mills, and then we had ethanol next distilleries to produce ethanol in this kind of mills. And today, you can see that the typical mill in Brazil produces sugar and ethanol. The percentage varies from 40 to 60. It depends on the situation. They're trying to maximize profit and reduce cost. We have approximately 400 mills with this kind of configuration in Brazil. They are more concentrated in the central-south part of the country, where 90% of the production takes place. We have a little bit in the northeast, about 10%, and many people believe that we have sugarcane planted in the Amazon. This is not correct. Most of the 90% of the sugarcane is produced in the central south and just a little bit on the coast and the northeast coast of Brazil. We're going to talk now about the main challenges we see in the future, in the next few years or decades for the ethanol market. First of all, let's look at the possibilities. What are the main markets we see for the ethanol? Because Brazil already is the main producer of sugar, responding for 50% of sugar in the world, and we are the second producer of ethanol. But we see good possibilities for bioelectricity in Brazil and good possibilities for chemical products in Brazil. Another possibility would be the exports of ethanol. There is very good chances for these three markets in the future. But in terms of research, we think that this is a sector that we needed to try to decrease the production costs, meanwhile still maintaining the whole sector sustainable. It's a big challenge. It's not something simple to do, but that's what we need to do right now. This was a short introduction about the way ethanol, sugarcane ethanol is produced in Brazil. You're going to see now in the next lectures more about sustainability, more about the production process. And I hope that you had a good understanding. And if you want, we can invite you to come to visit the production in Brazil. Thank you very much.